we were trying to rescue a father and son. I actually took the bow of my boat and I purposely crashed it onto the bow of their boat. And I finally got it figured out to the point where we were going to get him over, and lightning struck the guy's wheelchair, killed both of them instantly.
Some people, they're just born into the storm. Others, caught up in its fury. You just heard from our guest today. Welcome to How People Grow, the podcast, season 2. In this season, we're going to hear from a former heroin addict, a religious outcast, a Native American, former soldiers, all seeking something more. So tell me this, what makes a survivor rise? It's resilience, which is the ability to fight and to bounce back. I've been long fascinated by this subject because life is hard, and I've walked in the shadows, and here's what I've learned. The strongest hearts are often the most broken. Hi, I'm David Achata. Great to meet you. I've navigated many worlds from the corporate space to the complex world of faith. Welcome to the podcast. Well, thanks for coming back, friends, to the How People Grow podcast. I've got a super cool conversation queued up for you today with Vince Chamberlain.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Vince has become a friend of mine through the years, and he's got a really great story, and so I'm excited to have him here. So, Vince, tell us a little about yourself. Who are you?
My name is Vince Chamberlain. Um, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, just outside Detroit. I'm a Coast Guard veteran. After the Coast Guard, I spent several years working on tugboats, became a captain, and then I gave all that up, and now I cut hair. I'm a barber. That's kind of
Awesome.
my what I do now.
Yeah, and that's how we met. I remember I came in and when your hands touched my neck, I thought, this guy knows what he's doing.
Just
But Vince, I've been wanting to, I love your stories. Every time we sit down to talk,
yeah.
there's always something else that comes out. And so I thought it'd be so cool to have you on the podcast because I know that from your life, there are so many stories that exemplify that of a resilient person. And so the format of this season is we just begin with a principle of
Mhm.
resilience from your life. And then we'll go back and I want our listeners to get to know you a little bit and where
Mhm.
that came from. So, what's yours when you look back on your experience, the principle of resilience you think your life embodies?
The resilience, I think it's always come from it, when I was younger, it was like just self-preservation. But then it grew into uh serving, serving
Hmm.
others. And I found out that through serving others, I can heal myself and protect myself from
Hmm.
things going on around me, even when
Hmm.
things are really hard.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's not something that I've heard many people talk about as a principle of being able to bounce back. A lot of times in our culture, people think about it in terms of uh, like character building or practices for themselves.
Hmm.
So I'm super interested to hear, what does that mean? Like how has that principle of serving others been helpful for you through the struggles? And I want to get to
Well,
that.
some of it was given to me easy. Like some of it was, I got to survive this and take care of my kids.
Yeah.
That was a gimme.
Hmm.
So I didn't even have the option of thinking about myself.
Hmm. And when you say survive this, what
There
what do
was
you
a
mean?
period of time where um, things all fell apart and we were homeless for a while,
Hmm.
and money wasn't good. And I just lost my job as a boat captain,
Yeah.
which was good money, to immediately not being able to go to work because I didn't have anybody to take care of my children.
Right.
And then, you can't just lock your kids in the closet for a month with a ration full of Skittles and
Right.
and go float around the ocean. So
Yeah.
I just couldn't go to work. And I was starting over from scratch. I didn't have any marketable skills at the time. And it was just all circumstantial.
Hmm.
Uh, So I had to put myself through barber school, pretty much in that state of homelessness.
Okay, so that's how you came in to become a barber.
Yeah. Um, it was kind of the goal in the first place to get away from the mariner life. I was getting
Yeah,
burnt out. I was gone from my family for all long periods of time.
right.
And I wanted to do that, but then it was kind of forced upon me.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. All right, Vince. So it's coming together now. I vaguely remember you telling me some of this through the years.
hmm.
And so I want us to get there, but you've mentioned the mariner life.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's go back and let's hear the origins of where'd you come from?
Okay.
What was life like? And how did you end up in the mariner life?
Um, I grew up on the Great Lakes,
Uh-huh.
and there's down here in the South, people don't think about it, but up there, there's mariners everywhere. There's people that work on the lakes.
Yeah.
So I've been around them before. I've been around people that work on freighters and tugboats and work the
Hmm.
docks, and
Hmm.
so I knew it was a thing.
Yeah.
And when I was young, my dad, he would take us out on the boat all the time. Very first lesson I ever learned about driving a boat was don't drive a boat where birds are walking.
That's a good lesson,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. The water will
Right.
look deep, but it's shallow, and you can see birds walking around.
Yeah,
So he
good.
was like, "That's a good way to tell if it's
Huh.
shallow over there." It's the very first
Yeah.
lesson he ever taught me. And I just fell in love with the water. I just wanted to be on it all the time. Couldn't
Hmm.
keep me off of it.
Hmm.
Even after that, I'd have canoes or whatever, anything I
Hmm.
get my hands on, just to
Hmm.
be out there. So it was just kind of part of our culture a little bit, mixed with me just being around it and falling in love with it, really.
Yeah.
There's some kind of freedom about being out there.
Hmm. So how did you end up from this life on the Great Lakes to the inner city? Because I think maybe did you move to the city at some point?
No, uh at the very beginning of my childhood, we were like in a suburb area,
Okay.
the quote unquote downriver area.
Hmm.
And then we moved further out into the country.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It like the city kind of encroached on us a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like we had a couple acres, even though we were in the suburbs, and it was uh our 2-lane road got turned into a 4-lane road, and it
Okay.
was time to get out.
So it was like a moving out of the city,
Hmm.
more of. I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah, and then hardship happened. My father passed away,
Okay.
and all this. I ended up moving in with my grandma.
Okay. How old were you when your dad died?
I was can't you'd have to figure out the math, but basically, my dad died 2 days before the millennium,
Uh-huh.
so sometime between Christmas and the year 2000.
Okay.
I can't
Right.
remember exactly when.
How did it impact things for you to lose your dad?
Um, that was rough. He died of ALS, so
Hmm.
he was sick for 5 years
Hmm.
and just slowly deteriorated. Um, and then when he died, it really flipped everything upside down. So he had a really good job. When he got sick, he was forced into like disability.
Hmm.
So in the beginning, like, we had a decent amount of money. My dad had a good job and all this. And then things just started slowly falling apart. I had to grow up real fast because I used to have to help my dad a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I have some adopted siblings. So, uh, but then when he passed, my mother kind of went off the deep end
Hmm.
and turned to drugs and alcohol.
Hmm.
And it just got bad progressively after that, to the
Yeah.
point that I ended up with my grandmother out on her farm.
Okay. So
Mhm.
you needed to get away from that and when live with your grandma.
Yeah, when it came right around high school, uh,
Okay.
yeah, it was good. It was, so I was struggling, as a young kid. From ninth grade to 10th grade, I went to 4 different high schools because I kept getting
Man.
kicked out for fighting. And I was just
Hmm.
angry at the world.
Right.
So that fourth high school, I was like, I'm just gonna go out there and live with my grandma and be normal. It was kind of a choice I made.
Yeah. Right.
I literally rode my bike out there. It was 14 miles. I rode my
Well,
bike out there and I was like, I'm here now. And my grandmother was like, okay,
I'm gonna live here.
yeah.
And she just understood that
Yeah, oh yeah,
she
yeah.
knew what was going
She's my
on.
best friend.
Oh man, so great. And so, how did things change for you when you went to be with your grandma?
They changed a lot for the better. She wasn't wealthy at all. We were still pretty poor, but we didn't know it.
Hmm.
We had a farm,
Yeah.
so I had eggs and
Hmm.
fruit trees, and
Right.
I don't know. It was just peaceful. It was really peaceful.
Mm. And what led you to, like, walk us through from that period to the military? Because you ended up in the military.
Yeah, yeah. Military kind of Yeah, you remember those tests, those like litmus tests you used to take to see what you had to do for like what you're gonna do when you grow up?
That's
Remember
right.
those stupid things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was
Every time
yours?
I do one of those things, it was like you're gonna be a cop. So
Really?
yeah. So I even right after high school, I went to community college to start studying law enforcement.
Yeah.
And within the first semester, I was like, I hate this. I don't want to
Hmm.
be in school right
What
now.
did you hate about it?
I was just burnt out from life, you know. I
Yeah.
kind of had a hard run.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I struggled just because, I just had so much going on at home. It was
Yeah.
hard to like sit and study and be a normal student
Yeah.
when your life's in chaos. And it was just burnout. I was already experiencing burnout at that
Hmm.
age.
Hmm.
And I was like, I gotta get out of here. I need to try something.
Right.
Me and my brothers went on a camping trip in Kentucky,
Hmm.
and we pitched a tent on this lake. It wasn't a campground or anything. It was literally just in the middle of nowhere, nowhere. And went on this camp trip, and it was great. We took like almost a whole summer off. Went back home, and me and my brother were like, "Man, we gotta find jobs." We ended up. This is gonna sound strange, but we ended up as bartenders at a Denny's.
Both of you?
Yeah. So the Denny's
Okay.
the Denny's right next to the Detroit airport used to have a bar in it. I don't even know if it's still there anymore.
Right.
And I would bartend.
Uh-huh.
And I was talking to my brother, and we were sitting there watching UFC or something on his couch one day. I was like, dude, we're bums. Like we're kind of losers
What
right
do
now.
you
Like we need
say?
to do something with ourselves. And he was like, yeah, you're right. So
He agreed.
so we went that next day and we both joined the military.
Together.
Yeah, he joined the army and I joined the Coast Guard. But
Okay.
we swore in together. We went to boot camp on the same day and graduated on the same day.
Wow, what was that like to swear with your brother and graduate at the same time?
It was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. Something that me and him got to do together.
Yeah. How wild, man. So you ended up, so here's Vince from the Great Lakes,
Hmm.
bartender from Denny's,
It was
in,
terrible. So bad.
ends up in the Coast Guard. Okay. So walk us through what was the experience like for you and what kind of job did you have?
I was a bosun mate, which is the oldest, you know, career on the water. It's
Hmm.
just the guy who's the master, he's just the master mariner. Everything out on deck, anything above deck, none of the engine room stuff. So all
Yeah.
the navigating and handling ropes and tying the boat off and launching the small boat and painting the boat and
Hmm.
maintaining the outside of, the integrity of the boat.
Yeah.
Those are like when you think of a sailor, that's what I was.
Hmm.
Like all the knot tying and
Yeah. Right.
you know, yeah.
So, so like what happened in the like how long are you in there?
Okay.
What kinds of things were you facing when you were in the Coast
So
Guard?
my first 3 years I was in for I pushed 10 years. I got real close to 10 years. But my first 3 years, um, as far as the Coast Guard experience goes on paper, it was kind of just like a run-of-the-mill Coast Guard experience.
Hmm.
Nothing crazy. I got to do some really cool things. My very first job was on an ice-breaking tugboat
Hmm.
on Lake Michigan.
Hmm.
And that's where I learned how to be a sailor, like all the basics. And the first day there, you got to do 90 days of just doing dishes. It's just like a rite of passage.
Right.
And then you work your way out on deck and you got to learn how to paint. And you got to learn how to tie a knot and tie the boat
Hmm.
off and take orders. And
Hmm.
but breaking the Great Lakes is really cool. Driving through ice is like a wild experience.
Right.
But so then I went from there. I went to training. I ended up in Florida. Still some. I did a lot of buoy tending, which is like just making sure the markers are where they were. And so my first 3 years were just like honing my craft, like becoming a sailor. And then after that, I started getting into search and rescue and law enforcement,
Hmm.
and things got a little more sporty after that.
Right.
Driving out in the storms and
Hmm.
trying to keep people alive. Being, it was a lot like what you think of a firefighter, where we would live at the station for 48 hours,
Hmm.
and whenever the alarm went off, you throw on your super suit and try to go save people.
Yeah. Right. What's on a super suit?
Not a super suit, just like, throw
What?
on your uniform, your boots,
Your
and
super suit.
yeah, yeah.
I'm envisioning some special outfit
No,
that
no,
has
no. These are
like
just
a
basic
utility
uniform.
belt.
No, I mean we did basically, but
So you're in search and rescue,
mhm.
and what types of situations did you find yourself in doing that job?
uh, all of them. Uh,
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's any paramedic or firefighter will tell you. Sometimes it's just boring, like a lot of missing fingers, goofy stuff like that. People just putting their hands where they don't belong, or uh, strokes and heart attacks and those types of things.
Hmm.
But then sometimes it's like they're stuck in a storm, and you got to go weather the storm to get them,
Yeah.
and then bring them home safely.
Hmm.
It was kind of my job just to keep their heart pumping long enough to get them to the beach and put them in a paramedic and put them in an ambulance.
Hmm.
I was kind of like get them off the ocean, put them in an ambulance was my mission.
Right. What's one of the rougher situations that you had to navigate during that time?
um, there were some real bad ones. I won't tell you the worst ones, but we I had it. We were trying to rescue a father and son. The father was like a Vietnam veteran. He was dying of cancer, and he got this wild idea. He knew he was going to die. So they bought a sailboat, and his whole goal was just to sail the coast of America until he died.
Hmm.
Like it's just how he wanted to spend his last days.
Right.
Well, they got out there and they got stuck in a storm. It was real bad. It was like something out of a movie. Like there was water spouts and
Hmm.
lightning and all the things. And we were going out there, and I was having a real hard time. I'm not on video, so I don't know how to explain it. I was having a real hard time when my boat was on top of the wave. They were down in the trough.
Hmm.
So we were seesawing,
Yeah, makes
and I was having a
sense.
hard time getting the boats next to each other. As I was the one that drove the boat.
Hmm.
And I was having a hard time getting the boats side by side so that we could get the people off of it. And I got myself in trouble for this. I'm not anymore, so I don't care. Whatever. But I actually took the bow of my boat and I purposely crashed it onto the bow of their boat. So
Uh-huh.
we became one boat.
Okay.
The other problematic thing was the guy that was dying was in a wheelchair.
Oh,
So now I got a guy in a wheelchair. I got to get off the boat.
yeah.
And so, and this is hours. I mean, it took us a few hours to find him. It took us time to get out there. It took me time hassling with the waves to get next to him. Now we're trying to get this guy that's in a wheelchair onto my boat safely from his boat. And it was just all this effort. And I finally got it figured out to the point where we were going to get him over. And lightning struck the guy's wheelchair
No way.
and killed both of them instantly.
Right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my guys out on
Wow.
deck, he was totally blinded. If he wasn't clipped in, he would have fell in the water,
Yeah.
you know. And it's weird. It's weird. That's a weird thing to go through. Like you just don't win them all.
Yeah.
And that's extreme. That's like a wild.
Oh man. Oh, how intense.
But
Yeah.
there's days that it was like I didn't do anything, and then I went and played volleyball at the end of the day.
Right.
So
Well, we have someone in our family who was in the Navy during World War II, and his job was to save downed fighter pilots. And he's still alive. He's in his 90s. And I asked him one time, anytime I get to sit with him, I hear his stories. And I asked him one time, I was like, so, like what do you remember the most,
hmm
about these experiences?
hmm
And he said in not so many words, basically, he said, I remember every face of every person I ever saved because none of them survived.
yeah,
So in other words, like the lifeless bodies of people is what he
yeah,
remembers.
that checks out. There's so many people that I did save.
Yeah.
I'll never remember. You
Yeah.
do remember the ones you lose, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's how just pain and stuff that in a way is unresolved seems to try to resolve itself. It's
Well,
like,
the high adrenaline
yeah.
burns it into your psyche,
Ah, right.
and then the adrenaline dump after is miserable.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I
So
used
what
to
do you
throw up.
mean? What do you mean the adrenaline dump? What happens?
Just imagine being like on this insane high, you know,
Yeah.
like your adrenaline's through the roof,
Yeah.
all the things, but then when it's said and done, it's like drinking too much caffeine. You crash.
Hmm.
You push yourself past the psychological limit, physical limit too. It's all chemical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would always get me in the shower. A lot of times I'd throw up and
Huh.
just, and then
Yeah.
you're exhausted and you're weird for a day after,
Wow.
and it takes a little bit for equilibrium to come back.
Mm. Yeah, you've shared with me just little bits about some of those days and then you left the military.
hmm I was kind of forced out.
Okay.
It was remember sequestration and all that with Obama.
Hmm.
They did a reduction in force.
Hmm.
Long story short, I had to make a whole lot of rank in a little bit of time, and it wasn't looking good for me. So I just chose not to reenlist.
Okay. Yeah, and where'd you go after military?
I went directly to, I had 90 days of terminal leave, which is
Hmm.
like where they still pay you for 90 days, like you're in.
Yeah.
And I went directly to the academy to get my captain's license,
Okay.
which was in Bayou La Battery, Alabama.
Yeah, so this is how I met you. You were telling me a little bit about some of these days of driving tugboats, private yachts,
Yeah.
and the wild stuff. And I remember when I first met you, I couldn't remember your name, so I would call my family, be like, "Where'd you go?" I'm like, "I went to talk to Steamboat."
Oh yeah, steamboat. I was thinking John boat, but yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, no, Steamboat.
yeah.
And you're for our listeners, you can probably you may or may not be able to tell, but this is actually the first podcast that I've done live with somebody. So Vince is actually just sitting here right beside me. Um, but yeah, well, so you're carrying all this stuff
hmm
from the military, then you go straight into this other kind of wildlife. What happens at this season of your time?
So it went unexpected, obviously, but um, it was weird. Yeah, I went through the process. It took me 3 months to get all the licensing I needed. It was it was just I kind of got the fast track a little bit because of my experience, and the Coast Guard controls licensing, like boat licensing. So my hours and things helped me get a bigger license. But I went through all that, and it was 3 months of me just living in this little dorm room in Bayou La Battery, which is middle of nowhere, Alabama. And I had a good time down there. I made some friends. But after that, I was thinking, I got almost 10 years of experience of this stuff, you know.
Hmm.
I'm gonna go on a boat and be, I know what I'm doing. I wasn't gonna be have a big ego or nothing, but I was feeling confident. And I went out there and I realized towboating is a completely different ballgame. It's just a different skill. You're still on the water, but
Yeah.
just a different job. It's a different skill. Things are done differently,
Uh-huh.
and the people are different. And those guys are salty and angry at the world, you know. I
Right.
showed up and they're like, here's this Coast Guard guy. I learned everything from a book. That's how they treated me. I'm
Oh.
like, no, dude. Like I lived it. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
So I had to earn their respect. And I was in Louisiana, my first gig. Or no, I'm sorry. I went to back to Detroit first after that.
Okay.
I was working on the lake on Detroit River, and I was bringing the freighters into the Rouge River, which is where like the Edmund Fitzgerald was trying, if you remember that boat,
Yeah.
to the docks. It's like
Right.
where all the refineries and all that stuff is up in there. And I learned a lot over there. That was cool. But those
Mhm.
guys were salty too. I was the first new hire in 25 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, so the captain, the deckhand, and the engineer were had been working together for 25 years before I
Hmm.
even showed up. And they're old and salty. And I'm like this young guy. And I just did what I was told. I knew as soon as I
Smart.
walked in, they were all veterans too. They were all military veterans.
Oh, okay.
As soon as I walked in, I was like, yep, I know my role here. So and
Right.
and I and I I learned a lot. I learned about how barges hook up properly, and I learned all
Hmm.
this stuff and how to, swing a 700-foot freighter sideways in a current, and then stuff like that.
Hmm.
All kinds of wild. So
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
But that year, the Great Lakes had the worst winter in a long time.
Hmm.
And the Great Lakes froze over, which this never happens. Froze over like 98% solid.
Whoa.
So it was even frozen, which it never does that. Froze past Chicago.
Hmm.
And it was just solid. So the entire fleet got laid off. Anybody who worked on a boat was like sent home. And I had only been on the boat for 6 months at that point.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, I'm fresh out of the military. I can't afford a layoff right now. So I was calling all over the country, and I ended up down in Louisiana. So
Yeah.
I had to uproot my family and take them to some
Yeah.
place I'd never been before.
Right. And in Louisiana, you saw some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Tell us what it was like to drive for private.
No, no, no. That was
Is
I
that
worked there first. That
is
was
that
after.
later?
Yeah, that's after. I worked on tugboats down there too.
There's so many chapters,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I worked down there for a while.
Yeah, but yeah, walk us through that time.
Um, so I worked for two different companies down in Louisiana, and it was good. It went well, but it was causing. I was gone for. If I was lucky, I was home for like a broken up 2 months a year.
Yeah.
So it was like a few days here, a few days there. And that was
Hmm.
it. So I was
Hmm.
gone. And I had my daughter, and then my son came. So now I got my wife at home with two kids. And it became really hard for me just being gone so much. And it
Hmm.
was hard on me too. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of I saw it coming, I was like, I can't sustain this life.
Hmm.
And don't take this wrong. I'm not talking bad about her. Okay. Because I had my faults too, but my wife fell into hardcore postpartum,
Hmm.
and that caused issues in our marriage. I didn't handle it the right way either. And we ended up splitting up.
Yeah.
And that's a real long story short.
Hmm.
But basically, now I can't go because I got to be home for my kids. And we ended up moving to her parents' house in Atlanta, so we lost everything.
Yeah.
I was doing odd end jobs. I worked for a plumbing company. I was making like $13 an hour, just barely getting by.
Hmm.
And then we lost everything. I went to her parents' house in Atlanta, and it never got better. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so then we're officially totally split up. I'm living in this camper on some dude's property with my kids, uh, and just putting myself through barber school using my GI Bill, which the GI Bill, they pay you a little bit, but I think I was making like $1,500 a month,
Yeah.
and that's not a lot of money.
No.
And then barber school, while you're there, you got to be there from like 8 to 4. You're not getting paid. You get a little tip here and there, but it's school. So
Hmm.
like, I mean, at the end of the day, if I had $7 in my pocket, I was pumped. And get like a Four Loco and bag of chips, and I thought I was living around the block.
Right.
And yeah, I that was rough. But to make some extra income, um, at night, like three days a week, I would drive from Carrollton, Georgia, to Buford, which is a long drive through Atlanta.
Hmm.
Sometimes it would take 2 hours. And I would drive boats out there on Lake Lanier.
Okay.
And that's where the yachting kind of stuff. I was driving houseboats out there.
Yeah.
And those people just live like they're on international waters. It's just people with way too much money
Hmm.
and all the drugs and naked people and
Yeah.
all the weird things that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. Right.
That crowd. And I got two babies at home,
Mm.
and I'm just staring out the window like, please, just get me through this.
Yeah.
I hated it. I hated every minute of it.
Hmm.
Um, but then at the end of the night, a lot of times I would just sleep on the boat, and then I would drive in the morning straight to school, straight to barber school.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When I think of you, I know some of these stories, but that particular image has always stuck with me because we had a conversation once about this,
Yeah,
and you shared about driving those yachts for these people with way too much money, all this stuff going on.
yeah,
staring out at the water,
Yeah.
like I've something has got to change here.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
asked you one time, I don't know if you remember what you said, but I asked you one time, how did that time change you? Do you remember what it said?
How did it change me?
Yeah.
No.
You said simple, man, a few words. You said, well, I changed.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like we normally think about change like an aspect about ourselves or a
Yeah.
deep wisdom or a lesson, but you said
Mm.
straight up two words, I changed.
Yeah, I did.
And how did you change during that time?
S- I think I might have put my family through a little bit more than we needed to because of my ego.
Hmm.
Like I was a captain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To this day, I got captain in front of my name. There's
Mm-hmm.
one time I had this jerk doctor. I was at a party, like wore a nice shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and his friend introduced him as like Jeff or whatever. He was like, "Hey, this is my buddy Jeff." He was like Dr. Phillips or whatever, and I was like, "All right, asshole, I'm Captain Chamberlain."
Right.
I was like, "We're gonna pull
Yeah,
that
let's
card."
do
I got
it.
you. So I got captain. There's a lot of pride that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stuck on it. I was like, "Man, how did I achieved all this stuff?" And I'm just sitting here with these losers down there, like eating club drugs and
Yeah,
doing whatever
right.
below deck right now so that I can drive them around.
Mm-hmm.
It was weird. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it hurt my ego a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But then I just, I was like, I could reinvent myself. Like I had to be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not me anymore.
Yeah.
You know, well, for whatever that door was slammed shut in my face, like I gotta do something. And then I got to thinking about who I am, and that's not who I am. It's just what I was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm a captain now, or I was a captain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think
It, it's
this is
not,
an important part, because about ego, I think that a lot of people don't understand. I think when a lot of people think about ego, they think just like a bad attitude.
yeah.
And the way that I understand it is what you said. It's all these layers of things that we've attached to ourselves that
Hmm.
aren't ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I've done a lot of stuff. Like I've been a pastor, I've been a corporate consultant, I've been a busboy too.
Yeah.
Why don't I attach that to my name?
Yeah.
I've been a waiter. Why don't I attach that to my name?
Mm.
Because it doesn't necessarily feed this perspective like I'm something.
Yeah.
And it's like we face these hard times and it forces us to peel away the things that we attach to ourselves that we thought made us something.
Yeah.
And so what happened for you when these layers get stripped away and you're like, I'm not those things?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Um, I became more motivated.
Hmm.
I was already motivated because of my kids.
Hmm.
You know, the idea is that I lost my dad. The idea of my kids not having me in their life is drives me insane. Like it's the worst possible thing I could ever imagine.
Hmm.
And I haven't always like been like a stud at being a dad. I mess up too, but uh, I don't know what happened to me was just peace, I guess.
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, this is what it is. Right. Ground
Hmm.
zero.
Hmm.
You know, I'm lucky. I'm not suffering from any addictions or,
Hmm.
like some people that go through homelessness. I couldn't even imagine go through that.
Right.
And I was like, this is just where I'm at. So let's
Hmm.
just start over. And I just did. And I little at a time. And
Hmm.
there was plenty of days I was like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna get through this, but
Hmm.
I just had to keep trying.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah, the whole mixing up who you are and what you are is wild.
Hmm.
Like there's people out there right now, if Alabama closed down like the college and they
Hmm.
lost to the football team,
Hmm.
they would go spiral out of control and have an identity crisis. You know what I mean? Because we do that to ourselves. I'm like, who you are, and what,
Yeah.
it's just weird.
So, how would you describe then, or how would you answer if somebody were to say, "Well, who are you?" Like now, how would you answer it? Apart from the ego stuff, like who are you, Vince? What would you say?
Yeah, I'm just me.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
So simple.
Yeah, you get it. You get what you get.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain that stuff anymore. Like,
Hmm. And I think that's a big feature of probably this phase of life where you've got to face the peeling away of your layers, where you get content to just say, "I'm me."
Yeah. Well, you don't even have to say it.
Yeah,
The answer really should be
just to be me.
stick around long enough and you'll find out.
Oh,
Like,
that's good. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's through your actions.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview the other day with a gentleman who had was an admirer of the musician Leonard Cohen,
Hmm.
and later in life, Leonard just lived in a simple house out in LA, and I think maybe might get this wrong, but he became a monk,
Cool.
was quiet in a monastery or retreated in a monastery. I may be getting it wrong, but it was something connected to that life.
Hmm.
And this guy developed a friendship because he was also regularly at that monastery doing retreats.
Yeah.
And so later in life, when Leonard Cohen wasn't living in the monastery, he was living in this simple house out in LA, and he invited this gentleman to come be with him. And so they hung out and they talked, and Leonard Cohen invited him when it was time to leave. This guy was taking his stuff, and Leonard Cohen said, "No, just why don't you come join me on the lawn?" So he grabs two chairs and he sits them on the lawn,
Yeah.
and they're facing out toward the neighborhood or the street. And Leonard Cohen sits down and doesn't say a thing. And this guy's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like, I'll let you have some quiet time."
Yeah.
And Leonard Cohen says in not so many words, "Oh, no, 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 no. Like, I just want to be with you in the silence."
Yeah.
Like the gift of just being together. Like that's the image to me of a guy who has lost some ego.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And honestly, man, that's how I feel when I come sit with you sometimes.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So let me like ask you some personal things about
Okay.
the peeling away of ego,
Hmm.
and as much as you're willing to share. So you've been able to come to this place where, at least at this phase in your life, you've started to peel away some of those layers to be content with who you are.
Yeah.
You've accepted the life you've lived, where you've come from, the things that have happened. What's it been like for you to kind of turn around and look at that and look at the hard things you've seen or faced, like even some of the military Coast Guard things, and sort of make space to feel it and deal with it?
Um, just to like cope with it or like just process it.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got there, but I did come to the conclusion that it was a gift,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the whole you got to go through something to learn something. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
can't know what love is if you don't know what hate is, or if you haven't been, you know,
Yeah.
it's like the whole silver spoon. We get mad at the rich kids with the silver spoon. Like, God, they don't know nothing. They ain't been through, but it's true.
Yeah.
Like to an extent, like that kind of idea, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you can't sit on a couch and watch some dude boxing and know anything about what it's actually like to box,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and and just going through the hard stuff has made me more empathetic. It's made me more caring, loving,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I learned that the only way that I could possibly ever make myself feel better about anything is through doing for others.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't care what it is, if it's going to the gym or sports cars and money or whatever your addiction is, like that's just filling your own self. And then eventually you're gonna need more and more and more to feel
Yeah.
good, to get that buzz.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you're just feeding this empty, endless hole of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like that weird law of attraction crap. It's like if you want to receive it, you gotta like push it away almost.
Right.
Or you ever read the Tao Te Ching or whatever that is?
What is it?
Tao Te Ching. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Uh-uh.
Taoism. A little
Oh,
book.
Taoism. Yeah.
It's a little
Uh-huh.
book.
Right.
I read it out of curiosity one time. I got obsessed with samurais and stuff. And but like speaking of this, there was like a little thing in there. It was like a pot doesn't have value because it's a pot. It has value because it has the void. within the
Mm,
pot.
mm, mm.
That's what gives it its value, is it can hold water,
Yeah. Wow.
So it's almost like you gotta empty yourself out so you can fill it with whatever,
It's good.
you know.
I love that.
Like even my tattoo now, like the pot is for the.
Hmm. I get it.
So I don't know. That's deep
Yeah, it is.
stuff, but that's just where I find happiness, and I
Hmm.
can't see anywhere else to find it.
Yeah.
We're all on this search to be like more content and happy. We'll go do something. Forgive
Right.
somebody that doesn't deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've journeyed with you over the last couple of years as you've talked a little bit about your own desire to serve people.
Hmm.
And like when we had Hurricane Helene that came through, you pulled together a bunch of stuff and
Yeah,
borrowed a pickup truck and went over and drove out into random
yeah,
little towns over in North Carolina just to help people out.
yeah.
And so I've seen you exemplify this, and you started this nonprofit for veterans.
Hmm.
So tell us a little about what is that called and what's your vision for it?
Okay, so it's called the FOB project, which is FOB, which that stands for Forward Operating Base
Mm-hmm.
for all the non-military people. Imagine you invade a country, that
Mm-hmm.
first little home base that you build.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like if you're playing Risk, you like
Mm-hmm.
conquer that little corner. That's the FOB,
Okay.
and that's like where you operate out of. So my goal is to create FOBs in a non-military sense all over the country,
Mm-hmm.
and they're gonna look like farms, but it's gonna be like farms out west with bunk houses and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then there's gonna be support units in towns that are gonna be gyms, lounges, things like that, healthy things to come home to. And I want to work directly with the military so that when a veteran gets out of the military, we're going to make the getting out of the military feel more like going to a new unit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you get transferred to a new unit within the military, even though if you go to a different state or a different country or whatever, it's the transition is pretty easy because you
Mm-hmm.
go there, it takes you a day or two to get to know everybody. You got your new crew,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that because we're team oriented people, we're very much team oriented people, and it's driven into our psyche that the lone wolf really doesn't survive.
Yeah.
And so I want to make getting out of the military feel like going to a new unit.
Mm-hmm.
And so there'll be a group of veterans here just waiting to receive them back home. And but the new mission is like life.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have small business incubators and therapists,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just getting the band back together, because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't realize PTSD isn't killing veterans. It is a bad thing. Don't take me wrong. PTSD is terrible and it's a serious problem and we got to deal with it properly. But it's the isolation after service, the immediate isolation, because even if you go home to your family that loves you, you've been gone for a while and they've got used to life without you
Mm-hmm.
and they can't relate to you
Mm.
anymore. They just can't.
Yeah.
And then the loss of sense of purpose. It's really hard to replace the sense of purpose that comes from being in the military.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to go from doing like what I did, was like saving lives, to being, you know, even now just cutting hair and paying my taxes.
Right.
That's why I'm doing this. I need something.
Yeah.
It helps
Right.
me just as much as anybody else. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so when you're isolated for too long, then you lose the ability to cope with your PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a sense of purpose, like that monk you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
he was on the extreme end,
Yeah.
right? He went into extreme isolation, but he had extreme sense of purpose to counterbalance that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying do that. I'm saying have a healthy balance, a
Mm-hmm.
sense of purpose and isolation.
Yeah.
And uh yeah, that's really the gist. And then I fully believe that through that we can lower the suicide rate, homelessness, addiction, all that because it's a preventative thing.
Mm-hmm.
We can
Yeah.
stop it before it gets out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the people that are already out and have those addiction problems or they're homeless, there's a million programs out there already. There's rehabs and homeless shelters and whatever. We'll get them into those programs, but then like people who relapse from rehab all the time, they're actually suffering the same thing that military veterans do.
Mm-hmm.
You go into rehab, you got your group, you got your common struggle, you get sober together, you make all these friends, and then you go back out into the world where you're alone,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And then you end up back in rehab.
Yeah.
So we'll be there to make sure they don't go back to rehab. So when
Mm-hmm.
the vet goes all the way through the program, they can come to us
Mm-hmm.
and have proper camaraderie
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
have like the Amish mindset, like, you know, oh, Susan or grandma's gutters fell off, like, and we'll just go over there and fix them. Like that
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff. Have
Mm-hmm.
community, like actual
Yeah.
community.
I love the vision behind it because in a way it's asking yourself, what do I wish I would have had when I would have gotten out? What would have been helpful
Well,
for
that's where
me?
it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the entire idea came from, was because I
Uh-huh.
was going through everything I went through. So I was immediately wrecked, even though I went to a very similar career path. Those guys on that tugboat didn't get me at all.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't understand. They were
Mm.
still, that's why their ego was super inflated. But they just didn't get me. And looking back at it, it just, I isolated even around people, and it just got worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that contributed to me not being able to be a proper husband when my wife was struggling,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Yeah, tell me a little bit about for our listeners and whoever hears this, if they want to find out more about the FOB project and ways to help, ways to get involved, how can they get that information?
So our website is thefobproject.org. There's a donate button. Um, right now, admittedly, I've been putting so much effort into social media that the emails are not all getting answered.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a one man show right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm struggling with that,
Mm-hmm.
admittedly. So I need some help there. Um, and the goal right now is we're just building. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting some income, and it's all just being untouched.
Yeah.
Our initial goal is 80,000,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can get our first support unit built. It's going to be a place where there's no alcohol, things like that. It'll be a gym with like a hangout area, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak,
Yeah.
in an office. I might even put a barber shop in there so I can
Nice.
actually be there, manage it, and do my job too.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
Um, right now, I've been doing really well on TikTok, but
Yeah.
we'll see in a couple
Yeah.
days
Yeah,
if
we'll
I'm still.
know
But
what
I did
happened.
move over. You can find me on YouTube. I don't have hardly any content on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But if the whole TikTok thing goes down, if you look up Thought Project on TikTok and it doesn't go down, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Um, but if that does go down, I'm just gonna shift to YouTube and I gotta rebuild.
Mm-hmm. What about an ideal scenario? Like, let's say in your first, you're starting to get this thing off the ground.
Yep.
Like, there's going to be somebody who's going to hear this who's looking potentially for something like this.
Yep.
Like, who are the helper type of people that you need right now?
Very first person I need is we're gonna have a resource officer. So I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna collaborate all the available resources that are already out there
Mm-hmm.
because any vet knows they're impossible to find, they're hard to Google. There's no like one place, one stop shop that you can go find resources. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to create that one stop shop and then have a resource officer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then that person will also be helping with emails and
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Yeah.
And like uh another thing we've been doing is I feel safe staying around here. A lot of vets, for people in general, they feel like their anonymity is safe online for some reason. But there's a lot of vets that go on Instagram or TikTok and things like that, and they openly admit that they're thinking about hurting themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
got a team of people that they immediately tag me in that stuff. So we find out who they are, and then we find their location and send the police.
Mm-hmm.
And we've saved a bunch of lives that way.
Wow.
And that's been no cost. It's just people
Yeah.
banding together.
And how can people participate in
And
that?
there's been people all over the country that I've never met before in my life.
Uh-huh.
We've been able to just like dig through the internet, find their Facebook, find this, find that, and find their actual address and send the police. And we
Wow.
saved several people that way.
Well, yeah, so somebody's listening and says, "Hey, I could do that." How
Yeah.
can they participate in something like that?
Contact me on social media.
Okay. And so on Instagram, what would it be?
Instagram's down right now.
It's down.
I'm
Okay.
hands off Instagram. I have a
Okay.
Facebook that
Uh-huh.
I desperately need help with.
Hmm.
Facebook's getting neglected too.
Right.
Right now, all my energy's been on TikTok for the most
Yeah.
part.
Uh-huh.
It's been going well. I'm almost 40,000 followers.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, so share a little bit about where people can find you. So we've heard about Fob Project website. How
Hmm.
can they find you in the other places?
You can Google Vince the Barber, Cleveland, Tennessee,
Okay.
and shoot me a text.
Nice. Okay, I love it.
Yeah.
We have probably just like 2 to 3 minutes left, and I want to circle back around to
Yep.
the principle
Hmm.
about serving others,
Hmm.
and I see it in your story, in your life, where that came from.
Yep.
So, what would you say to somebody as we finish up here who has had to struggle with some of this stuff, similar, different to losing a parent, find
Hmm.
themselves out of the military as an example, find themselves in a divorce,
Hmm.
find themselves with no place to live.
Hmm.
And you've got this principle of serving others actually is really a helpful way for you to find a way out of the woods.
Hmm.
Um, like what's your closing message about that principle to people who are struggling?
Even if you're at your lowest point and you're looking around, there's nobody that you can like physically serve. Like dig in your own brain. Like, is there someone you're holding bitterness against? You know, if you can, like, just one person, like, if you got that person in your head that's like the devil,
Yeah.
and you're like, I hate that person, and I hold a lot of resentment towards them. If you can find a way to forgive that person, then that's a baby step for sure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
let that go. Like, it's not hurting them any.
Yeah.
We hate people so bad that we're thinking that it's going to actually do anything, and it doesn't affect their life at
It
all.
just hurts us.
Yeah, it does hurt us. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Start with stuff like that, forgiveness, or
Mm-hmm.
get out of your house. Um, Stop isolating, go brush your teeth, change your
Mm-hmm.
clothes.
Mm-hmm.
I know how bad it can get. I know some vets that, I call them up. I'm like, dude, you brush your teeth. And like
Mm-hmm.
depression's crazy. It's a
Mm-hmm.
crazy place to be.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, go outside, do all the things, all the things that you hear, doctors say start brushing your teeth with your left hand, or, all that.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta change something. And even if it's small, do a single push up every morning, just one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Start some kind of discipline of some
Mm-hmm.
sort,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it is. The discipline and the resilience the resilience comes from the discipline and the struggle,
Yeah. Right.
and it's just like what direction you want to put that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been at the I've been at the top, I've been at the very, very top, and I've been at the very, very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you they both suck.
Mm-hmm. Both the top and the
Yeah,
bottom.
yeah, yeah. You gotta have some balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Because I think the top and the bottom are both really lonely places.
yeah, they are.
It's
Yeah, if you're
somewhere in the
hustling
middle.
so much that you're just, and you get all these goofballs that are like bragging about having several baby mamas. You see these rich guys
Oh
on YouTube
yeah,
and stuff.
come on.
Like, you guys are nut jobs.
All right.
That's not no way to live your life either. But all these like manly whatever they are. But yeah, my message, just don't give up on yourself.
Hmm.
And you just have to just change one thing, just change anything.
Yeah.
Even if the motivation isn't going to come,
Hmm.
you're not going to ever find, it's not like the joy comes first.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, I'm happy now, so now I can start doing stuff.
Hmm.
You might have to start doing stuff and still be depressed for a really long time.
Hmm.
You know, you just have to do it even if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And find a reason. You got to find a purpose. Sense of purpose is the greatest drug.
Hmm.
I've seen sense of purpose pull people out of the worst holes. And
Hmm.
if you got a veteran in your life that's isolating and pulling themselves away, and they're grumpy and short-tempered and drinking or whatever, instead of nagging them and telling them like, hey, you got to change this, you got to stop drinking, you got to stop doing this. Make them feel needed. That will pull them out of it faster than anything. You know, make them, they need to be needed. All vets do. Like, that desire to serve doesn't come when we take off our uniform. So like, even if it's just like, hey, I need help changing this tire. You know, they need to feel just anything. Start there. Make them constantly feel needed by you. Like, and tell them like, I need you here. I need help. You know, but don't, make sure your tone is right too. You know,
Right.
you know, just like make them feel needed in a good way, like accomplished, like they have a purpose.
Yeah, it's great. Vince, thanks, my friend. Thanks for being here. And for our listeners, you've got Vince's contact information in the show notes. I'll put his website. You can find him that way. And that's it for our conversation today. Thanks for being here. And Vince, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, have a good one.
Well, thank you, Vince, for being here. Your blessing, Captain Vince Chamberlain, as I know him, is just Vince. As the internet knows him, Vince the Barber. Check out the Fob Project. And if this is a helpful conversation to you, go out and check out our Patreon page, okay? Patreon.com/howpeoplegrow. You can support there in various ways. Next week, I've got Amy Buckingham, who's actually now a Dr. Amy Buckingham. Amy is a former client of mine and a friend, and I met her through our work at a hospital system out there in Northern California where she was raised, and she's from the Round Valley Indian Reservation, and she shares some of the story about her life growing up there, the crazy things it took her to get out, and how she found herself into the corporate world as a healthcare executive. So she's going to tell us some of her story. I'm looking forward to it. She'll be with us next week, and we'll see you then.